Hey everyone, welcome to Question Period Rewind. I'm Donna Skelly, the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. Get ready to travel back in time to 1986, the year when Microsoft went public, the Oprah Winfrey Show was first syndicated, and when Wayne Gretzky was at the top of his game with the Edmonton Oilers, breaking his own NHL record for the most assists and the most points in a season. These are records, by the way, that he still holds to this day. Now, let's take a listen to what the House was talking about.
Oral questions. The Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I have a question for the Minister of Trade. My question for the Minister of Trade is this. Your colleague in this weak and too late statement said this afternoon, quote, "We made our reservations about this approach, that is the approach to negotiate a settlement, clearly known from the beginning, but it was only after the federal government was committed to negotiate that the provinces were brought along." Your colleague neglected to tell this House in his statement whether the Ontario government supported the federal proposal to implement a stumpage fee increase of 10%. Could you share with the House whether or not you agreed to that?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The series of events was that the Minister of Trade, the Federal Minister of Trade, went to Washington, and an announcement was made concerning her visit there, and that message was later brought back to the provinces.
Supplementary.
It's absolutely not right.
I have invited the Minister to indicate the position of his government as to whether or not they have supported the offer to raise stumpage fees by 10%. That calls for a yes or no answer. And I might say to the Minister before he attempts another shot at it, that we have checked with Don Campbell, ADM U.S. branch in the Department of External Affairs, who told us explicitly that Ontario did in fact support the federal government's offer.
Minister.
Speaker, as I previously mentioned, the Minister of Trade, the Federal Minister of Trade, went to Washington. There were discussions that were held there, and subsequent to that, she announced that there was to be they would look for a settlement of 10%. That was later relayed to the provinces and relayed to the province of Ontario. I personally, on a couple of occasions, plus our ministry staff, have made her aware that we were not happy with that at all, but it was a national consensus that was given by both she and the Trade Minister from British Columbia.
Final supplementary.
Well, you may couch this in as long an explanation as you wish, but the public of Ontario and the opposition are going to demand to know whether you were part of that national consensus which you allege was in place, which supported the offer of a 10% stumpage fee increase or not. So, Mr. Speaker, I will repeat my question so that the people of Ontario who are watching and listening can understand whether the Ontario government fought against the 10% increase or proposed settlement or not. Did you in any way agree to a 10% stumpage fee increase? Yes or no?
Minister.
As I mentioned to the member, I mentioned the series of events that happened. When that was brought back and was brought and put before a meeting of all the representatives of the provinces, all the provinces agreed with it, and we also went in with it to support it.
New question. Order. New question, the member. You can worry about that as long as you want, but this is question period. New question, the member for Cochrane South.
To Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Trade. Did the Government of Ontario support the 8 to 10% solution before it was announced by Pat Carney in the Federal House?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can't tell you whether it was supported before she announced it in the House, but I can tell you, and I did tell you, the series of events where we objected to her making that announcement before that had been relayed to us as a province.
Supplementary.
That is completely meaningless nonsense. We want to know if you were part of the national consensus to arrive at the 8 to 10% proposal made by Pat Carney. Did you agree? Were you part of the national consensus when that was announced or not?
Of course you were. Own up.
Minister.
When we attended the meeting after the announcement had more or less come out of Washington, there was a meeting between Pat Carney and the ministers of trade from across the province. There was agreement by both the federal government and the other provinces, and as I say, Ontario reluctantly went along with that decision.
Order. Final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, quiet reluctance is no defense. You never voiced publicly your concern when the announcement was made. You never voiced publicly your concern until you concocted this line of defense for this statement today. Never once before today have you announced that you disagree with the 8 to 10% offer of Pat Carney. And in supporting that proposal,
Supplementary.
what studies have you done? And what studies are you prepared to give today that demonstrate what the job loss will be in Northern Ontario in the forest products industry and how many mills will have to close down because of your acquiescence in this proposal? And why won't you give them? You refused to give them to me last Friday. Why won't you?
Order. Order. You've already asked 2 to 3 questions. Minister.
Those are questions which you as a member maybe should also be asking of Ottawa as to their role that they played in this particular issue. We are not looking at jobs being lost in the North. We intend to fight this decision so that there is no duty placed on it at all.
New question, the member for York South.
Speaker, what the minister appears to be telling the House today is that the government intends to fight its own position. I'd like to ask the minister, since he has now admitted, though the Minister of Natural Resources did not have the courtesy or the courage to admit it categorically in his statement that he made to the House, but since the minister himself has now admitted that Ontario in fact went along and endorsed the 10% position, would the minister not agree that the impact of that decision, which you and your government endorsed together with the Mulroney Tories, cut our negotiating team off at the knees when it comes to resisting the view of the Department of Commerce that we are in fact subsidizing our lumber industry and that our exports to the United States are subsidized? Do you not realize that that's the impact of the 10% position that you took? And do you not realize that you have succeeded in undermining and subterfuging and sabotaging your own case in the United States of America?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we believe that this case can be reversed. In other words, that there won't be a 10 or an 8% surtax on that. We believe that ourselves working with the federal government and with the other provinces and with the industry itself, that decision can be reversed so that there is no charge. We go back to the 1983 decision.
Supplementary.
Speaker, the minister has become the expert at scoring his own goal. I'd like to ask the minister, does he not realize that Ontario is now committed itself publicly to a position of agreeing to a 10% surcharge? You have agreed with that. You've said that to Pat Carney. You're now part of that team. With what credibility can you go down to Washington and say 15 is unfair? Are you going to go down and say 15 is unfair but 10 would be fair? Is that the position you're going to be advocating in Washington when you take the position of the government of Ontario?
Minister.
As I stated, we take it that 10% does not stand, and we will be fighting to reverse the whole issue and bring it back to the 1983 figure.
Final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, it is unreal. It is literally unreal to hear this government and this minister say that his position now is that the position that they agreed with before is no longer the position of the government of Ontario. Is the minister saying that something that was a subsidy 2 weeks ago is no longer a subsidy today? Is that the position that the minister is taking?
Minister.
What I'm saying is that our original feeling on this whole matter was right. In other words, that it shouldn't have been supported. Now, I think that the other provinces in the federal government will agree with us that we should have fought it to the end.
New question, the member for York South.
Mr. Speaker, I have a question for the Minister of Health. I'd like to ask the Minister a question about the new situation with respect to extra billing. I'd like to ask him initially about the situation affecting a number of women. And I'll tell the Minister that I'm not in a position in the House today to give him names, because the names that have come to me and the women that have spoken to me have asked that I not reveal their names in public and that I not reveal the names of their doctors. However, I can tell the Minister that over the weekend I received information with respect to 3 additional cases, one involving a payment of $200, one involving a payment of $300, and one involving the payment of $350. $350 being demanded by an obstetrician up front, not as a guarantee of service, because the obstetrician says, I won't be there on the weekend and I won't be there if your baby has the inconvenience or temerity to be born after 5 o'clock. Not in any way as a guarantee of service, but simply as, quote, an administrative fee. I'd like to ask the Minister, does he not realize that this represents a fundamental abuse of the public, a fundamental abuse of women, and what does he intend to do about the situation of doctors demanding fees up front before they will serve the patients of Ontario?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman knows that legislation provides that should not take place in the manner in which he has indicated that it is. He knows right well that the college has expressed very strongly their suggestion that at no time should charges like those act as an impediment to delivery of or access to insured services. Obviously, I would tell the honourable gentleman that by providing me with the names and of those particular people and the physicians, that together he and I could work out a way of attacking that type of practice. I don't find it acceptable in my view at all that this is going on, and I think together that we could probably find a way to address the concerns that this type of charge raises in my mind.
Supplementary.
Speaker, it's the responsibility of the ministry to get a message out. This is not a practice of 1 or 2 people. It's a practice taking place across the board, and the minister knows it. And it is appalling to me to know that the minister has not taken any systematic steps to sit down with the College of Physicians and Surgeons and ensure that this kind of practice doesn't continue. I'd like to refer the minister to another case, and that is to say a bill that was presented to, or a letter that was presented to a patient after the passage of Bill 94, which states as follows: the province of Ontario has recently passed a bill limiting a surgeon to 70% of the fee schedule, quote, regardless of the nature of a surgeon's expertise or the time of the staff involved in organizing your surgery. And I will omit some of the letter for brevity, Mr. Speaker. He goes on to say, in view of the high technology and expertise required and staff time, we would appreciate a voluntary contribution of $500. This is, for the minister's information, for an eye operation. You are under no obligation to comply with this request, but your support would be appreciated. We are encouraged by the patients who have been successfully operated on and who have helped us in this manner.
Question, please.
I didn't make this up, Mr. Speaker. It's right here in black and white. I'd like to ask the minister, is he prepared to take steps to stop doctors from bilking patients for so-called voluntary contributions, for so-called successful operations?
Minister.
Speaker, I think that it has come to no one's surprise that I'd be concerned about letters like that one, which are being distributed. We have, in fact, and I think the honourable gentleman would want to know, set up meetings to talk directly about this issue with the college. You have indicated in your preamble to the question that we haven't done anything to systematically analyze what, in fact, is going on. We are doing that, and we are concerned together that somebody should be asked to infer from the content of the letter that a successful operation is dependent upon a voluntary contribution. I think from my standpoint and from the standpoint of people who are involved in the profession and would like to ensure that people do not abuse the patient's rights, obviously would like to follow up on that letter, I would be pleased to receive the names and otherwise of the people involved so that I could pursue it, and so that it could be pursued in my meetings with the college and with the association as well, with whom we're also having meetings.
Final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, since the minister is meeting so often with the College of Physicians and Surgeons and the OMA, does the minister not agree with me that it's reasonable on the part of the public to expect a process of negotiation over the next few days which will produce a categorical statement and a categorical position that physicians will not send bilking letters with respect to donations, that there will be no so-called standby fees or administrative fees which prevent people or dictate the choice of physician by a physician, that patients will have access for normal medical services without having to pay out of their own pocket? Does the minister not think that that kind of statement should be forthcoming in a very short time indeed, so that the patients of this province will know that once and for all they are not going to have to pay out of their own pocket for normal medical service in the province of Ontario?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think that it is, from my standpoint, necessary that we deal with some of the problems that have developed largely from the historical side of the development of our healthcare system. We have a schedule of benefits which talks about insured services, and it was really lifted holus bolus from the guidelines, the fee schedule guidelines, and I think that the only thing that has been really defined adequately has been the payment that is to be made for each of those insured services. We have a large number of questions to deliberate upon between myself as Minister of Health, the members, representatives of the profession, the college, to come to grips, I think, with what is now much clearly a job that we have to finish up. It was not finished before, and that is, what is an insured service? What is the definition? And in some ways, as expressed by the College of Physicians and Surgeons representative on the weekend, what is the rules and regulations within which this system is operating? I can tell the member that it is, from my standpoint, necessary that we, in fact, set up those guidelines clearly, and we're embarking upon that. We're trying to clarify where these things are going. I can tell you that the example which you quoted from, the letter which you quoted from, is one example, but there have been reports in the papers of others which caused us as much concern.
Order.
The question of someone who was charging extra or asking for donations in hospitals, but we will check through those.
New question. The Leader of the Opposition.
I have another question for the Minister of Trade, who has assured us he's going to try and bargain back what he implicitly gave away. Mind you, it reminds me of offering Rod Lewis $2 million and then asking him if he'll please give $31,000 back. So you've got a lot of practice at this. My question for the Minister of Trade is this: prior to you going along with the offer of a 10% increase in stumpage fees, did your ministry do a study of the impact of such an offer? And if so, how many jobs did that study indicate might be at risk in Northern Ontario?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as has been mentioned by the Minister of Natural Resources, this ministry was very involved from the very beginning, not only with the visit of the Premier to Washington, but also our MITT offices throughout the United States also did a lot of lobbying. The minister and myself had many, many meetings with the provincial ministers. We met with Mrs. Carney. We expressed our concern of it. Our ministry is continually doing studies as to what the results would be of a 10% surcharge on the we estimate that between 500 and 1,000 jobs could be lost in the lumber business if this were accepted.
Supplementary.
You mean to tell this House that you, knowing that there were 500 to 1,000 jobs at risk in Northern Ontario, voluntarily said to the federal government that they should relay to the Americans that you were prepared to go along with an arrangement which cost a minimum of 500 to 1,000 jobs in Ontario? How do you justify that position where you, the Minister of Industry, Trade and Technology, voluntarily gave up 500 to 1,000 jobs in communities, small communities across Northern Ontario?
Right. Minister.
That is simply ridiculous. The thing is, as I mentioned to you, that's simply ridiculous. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about.
Now you're talking, Huey.
I explain how the events went along and how we were pulled in with the other provinces and with the federal government. Your federal Tories in Ottawa are the ones that brought this on, and don't forget that either.
Order. 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 The member for Ottawa Centre would like to ask a question. Order. Order. The member for Ottawa Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Community and Social Services. In response to my question last week on daycare, he admitted he's done nothing about the problems that are going to be created by the removal of indirect subsidies to municipally operated daycare centres, and that within 2 months. What I'd like to know is what he's telling us is going to happen to families in Thunder Bay and other areas where the removal of that indirect subsidy is going to have the effect of doubling daycare fees in some cases, and certainly requiring families to withdraw their children from those daycare services.
Minister.
My recollection of my answer to the previous question did not include the phrase that we had done nothing. I believe that what I had indicated to the member was that, in fact, the process has been going on for 3 years, and that last fall I had extended the period of time for an additional 12 months, from December 85 to December 86. I also told the member, Mr. Speaker, that we were quite willing, and in fact were in the process of working with a number of the municipalities to solve their problems either completely or partially on an individual basis, because the situation is different in every area. In the member's own community of Ottawa, the spread between what should be charged and what is being charged is I believe, $2 to $3. In other communities, it's $8, $9, $10, $15 in some cases. So the situations are very different. We have indicated that the federal government has made very clear to us, at a very, very costly financial penalty, that we cannot continue this process. But we are not in the process of simply going out and closing down centres. That's not our job. Our job is to work with them individually, but we must have cooperation and support from the municipalities as well.
Supplementary.
What the minister is telling us is that he's looking to the municipalities of Ontario to provide daycare policy when he doesn't have one.
Right on.
What he's asking the municipalities to do is increase their level of subsidy, and what we'd like to know is when he's going to have a policy, when his famous child care review is going to be finished, and what he's going to provide for daycare centres in municipalities which have struggled along with their municipal approval in some cases, when those fees go up and families drop out.
Minister.
Good question. We are not asking the municipalities to make daycare policy for this province. This government will make daycare policy for this province. It's in the process of doing that right now. What we are saying, however, is that the municipalities may not legally, unilaterally, make daycare policy in the form of indirect subsidies. That's what we're telling them. We are telling them at the same time we're prepared to work with them. We're prepared to assist them to raise the ceiling under which individual families in fact can qualify. And that can happen in quite a number of these municipalities. It's that cooperation and that joint venture that we're saying has to take place.
New question. New question, the member for Cochrane South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Trade. Mr. Minister, could you specifically answer my leader's question? At the time that you went along with the 8 to 10% national consensus, the time that you went along with that consensus, did you have studies in place that showed the potential job impact?
When the decision was made, as I mentioned, that they were going to, along with the 10% offer, we did not at that time have any job figure loss. We estimated, as they say, that it could run between 500 and 1,000. We do not intend to let that happen. We intend now, I would say, along with the other provinces and the federal government who will run in with us, that we will fight any charge.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary. This minister went along with an 8 to 10% proposal without knowing what its economic impact would be on the workers of this province, without knowing what its impact would be in Northern Ontario. Mr. Minister, out of any sort of responsibility and decency and respect for those jobs, why didn't you just say no?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, we did say no both to the federal government and the other provinces, but the consensus had been made that they were going along with the offer that had been extended by Ms. Carney in Washington.
New question, the member for Essex North.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of the Environment. If he'll take his seat. Okay. Mr. Speaker, on May the 12th, I asked the Minister to close down the landfill site in the township of Maidstone. Again, Mr. Speaker, on October the 10th, I asked the Minister once again in a form letter if he would close that site. I have not had a response to that as of yet. Last Friday, my leader, our environmental critic, and concerned citizens of my riding, along with myself, toured that site, and we found that that site has actually worsened. Nothing or very little has been done to correct the operation of that site. My question is, why will the Minister not order the closing of the Maidstone landfill site, at least until a comprehensive investigation has been done to determine the real damage to the water supplies in the area?
Minister.
We'll do a little of each. That's me. The member would be aware that I was aware, by the way, that the member was down there along with his leader and the environmental critic of the NDP, and I have read some of the newspaper coverage of your visit to that particular site. I often wonder, however, having read this and other material, what the stand of the NDP is in this issue, because a former very prominent member for Windsor Sandwich, who was in this House for a number of years and had a...
Point of order?
Point of order, yes.
Point of order?
Mr. Speaker, I am the MPP for Essex North. I am asking the question. I'm not concerned about other people that are not representing that particular riding. Thank you.
Order. I'm sure the Minister will answer the question.
Mr. Speaker, the only reason I mentioned that was because it wasn't just you at the site. It was the member for Lakeshore, who does not represent the riding, the member for York South, who does not represent the riding. And so I thought that it would be useful to share with you, or to wonder aloud, Mr. Speaker, what the position is, because the former member for Windsor Sandwich, who was in this House for some 10 years, a very prominent member of Windsor City Council, said that the solution to it is simply to pile the garbage higher.
Order. Supplementary, the member for Lakeshore? No.
Mr. Speaker, over the course of this summer, I have been in many ridings as well as my own, looking at incredibly awful landfill sites, may they be in Northumberland Township, in Tiny Township, or in Maidstone Township. And the position of my party is very clear. I'd like to ask the Minister why, in all of his discussions, there is no concentration on recycling. We have today a brief from the Canadian Union of Public Employees pointing out the economic advantages of it. Here in Metro, less than 2% of our garbage is recycled, whereas 12% in the township of Kitchener. Why is the Minister continuing to say he doesn't have a policy and that we don't have a policy when we have seen no concrete evidence of any...
Order. Minister.
In answer, in fairness to the member for Essex North, my friend who has discussed this on a number of occasions, Mr. Speaker, I didn't want to say to him that it is without some concern and his concerns are not valid. I simply mentioned that because there are a number of people in the area who have an interest in that particular landfill site and who have different views. As both members would know, we have had a special team there from the Ministry of the Environment. As soon as I saw this as being a problem, assuming this office as minister, we started to undertake those kinds of activities, which include prosecution of individuals, which included specific new staff being placed on the site, which included a consulting company doing tests, and so on. Now, to the member for Lakeshore, who in fairness asked a supplementary question, I can tell her that we have a very extensive recycling program in the province of Ontario, and I certainly encourage it. She would know, for instance, that we have increased substantially the amount of money that has been allocated for recycling. And I hate to scoop myself because I have a speech which I'm going to be making to the Recycling Council on Friday, but I can tell the member for Lakeshore, who is genuinely interested in these matters, that in fact we are, because of the kind of popularity that our program has, we are in fact significantly increasing the funding even within this year for recycling. And I know she'll be pleased with that.
Hear, hear. New question, the member for Brampton.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct my question to the Solicitor General. I think he'd like to ask the question. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the Solicitor General what stage the development or the plans for the Ontario Provincial Police headquarters in Brampton are at.
Minister.
He didn't want to be rude. Mr. Speaker, I can assure the member from Brampton that we are proceeding with the relocation plans as originally proposed by a previous administration. We still feel the location is appropriate. It has received some additional funding from Management Board to carry on with our team reviewing the work, and hopefully we'll see as priorities present themselves as to the date of moving.
Supplementary.
Supplementary. By way of supplementary, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to indicate I'll deliver this to the former Premier from Brampton and let him know what his Conservative friends think of him now. They think it's a funny question.
New question. The member for Nipissing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Trade, could the Minister confirm that British Columbia, the province who has considerably lower stumpage and forestry fees than Ontario, the province of British Columbia, in fact, is the major source of concern in the United States, and that, in fact, BC, British Columbia, called the shots in this whole affair on behalf of Canadians?
Minister?
I would certainly say that British Columbia has a lot of interest in this particular decision. But I would say to you, the federal government, your Conservative cousins in Ottawa, are the ones that made that initial offer and the ones who have followed through with it.
Good, Mike. Wait till you hear this one.
I guess what we don't understand, Mr. Minister, is why you would agree with BC. Why would you agree with BC, who we know have lower stumpage fees and who we know are the main concern? Where were you speaking for Ontario? Page 13 of the report. Page 13 of the decision that came out says, quote, the department received inadequate responses to its questions concerning the specificity of the provincial stumpage programs. They didn't have the information from Ontario. You didn't put Ontario's case forth. They say in the absence of that, that's what affected the ruling. Why would you go along with BC? Let them take the lead instead of putting Ontario's case forward.
Who's going to speak for Ontario?
In this particular case, the lead was taken by the federal government, who I think now know that the decision they made and the offer they made was not a good one.
New question, the member for Port Arthur.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the Minister of Northern Development.
What steps has the government taken to ensure that the recommendations of Dr. Rosehart with regard to the reopening of the Great Lakes Forest Products Wafer Board plant in Thunder Bay are implemented before October the 31st of this year in order to save the 150 jobs there?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not in a position to give the... Mike, are you asking for an appointment? Mr. Speaker, the honourable member, well, I know the matter that he takes these things very, very seriously. Let me just say, Mr. Speaker, I'm not in a position to give you the specifics on that at the moment. As you know, there's some suggestion about some capital upgrading of that particular facility. Discussions are still ongoing. We would very much like to see that opened. I do believe that Dr. Rosehart brought a cooler head to prevail in those discussions than had been there before, and I'm sure my honourable friend would agree with me. We are looking at his suggestions to be what they are, as constructive. I wish I could give you an answer right now, but I'll certainly keep in close touch with the honourable member as we're closer to decisions.
Supplementary?
If the Premier is unable to give me specifics now, can he guarantee the people of Thunder Bay that he can give them a specific answer before October the 31st of this year? As the Premier will know, or is the Premier not aware, that Dr. Rosehart in recommendation number 7 said, given the time constraints of equipment ordering and delivery, design and engineering, etc., it is felt that the agreements must all be in place by October the 31st, 1986. You don't have many days left. If no detailed agreement is reached by that time, Great Lakes Forest Products should be allowed in good faith to dispose of surplus equipment. What are you specifically going to do to make sure the agreements are in place by October the 31st to ensure the reopening of that plant and those 150 jobs?
Premier?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as you know, Dr. Rosehart called for some capital upgrading in that particular facility. Given its uncompetitive nature in the past, and he's been trying to sort out between the various claims between the two sides. And I'm just repeating myself, but you'll be aware that labor management relationships were in pretty bad shape when Dr. Rosehart... Well, they may, in your opinion, have been good, but that's not my opinion of being good. When people are shouting at each other, not trusting each other, not working together, I call that bad. And I don't think that my honourable friend would want to perpetuate a system. Well, I'll tell you what we've done. We brought in Dr. Rosehart. We've had some very constructive dialogue. There seems to be a meeting of the minds now with respect to some of the solutions. As I said to you, the government is prepared to play a constructive role and assist in keeping that plant open. We're determined to the extent that we have responsibility and influence in the situation to keep it open. Well, look, I have a responsibility for everything, as do you. And maybe you want to exercise your responsibility in this regard as well. And so what I'm saying to my honourable friend, if he'd stop shouting at me for just a moment, I will be back to, we're looking for answers quickly, not in the long term. We expect we'll have a determination this by October the 31st.
New question, the member for Cochrane South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In other words, the Premier is doing nothing on that issue as he's doing on so many issues.
And you have a question?
Nothing. He's smiling. He's having a good day. 1,000 workers in Northern Ontario are out of work.
Do you have a question?
And he's having a good day. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Industry, Trade and Technology, who the Premier just turned around and said he was doing a great job. A great job costing thousands of jobs. And let the record show that the Liberal cabinet is applauding the loss of 1,000 jobs in Northern Ontario because of your decisions. Real bunch of clowns, eh? It's a great joke when it comes to the North. It's a great joke.
Order. I'm sorry to interfere. I'm very sorry to interfere, but would the member please ask a question?
Thank you. You tell 1,000 workers in Northern Ontario that you're more interested in being civil than you are in fighting for their jobs. You tell them that. Mr. Speaker, my question is this. You went along with a national consensus. You agreed to it, otherwise Pat Carney wouldn't have announced it. You never did any job studies. Can you tell me why this government never once fought for Ontario interests and Ontario workers? Why didn't you even provide the basic information on the Ontario system to the International Trade Commission so that it can make a ruling that was favorable to Ontario?
You know, here you are talking as a minister of a previous government from the north who saw, if you want to take, for example, Sudbury, Inco go from 20,000 some workers to about 5,000 or 6,000 people. Like, what did you do in 42 years? We can name other examples of the north, too.
Where are you? Alan was the minister. It's different now, eh?
Order. Order. Minister, any further response or not?
Mr. Speaker, I have seen that it has been estimated that somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 sheets of paper were submitted in this documentation to fight this case. I can tell you that Ontario owned a lot of those sheets that were put in there. There was a lot of work done in those studies.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, in 1983, the previous government of Ontario was in Washington fighting for Ontario jobs and Ontario interests. They were there with the support of other provinces.
Order.
They were there with the...
Order. 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 And here I thought we were getting along fine. Lots of members were... Order. Order. If you wish to waste the time, just waste the time. I'll wait. Supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My supplementary to the Minister of Industry, Trade and Technology was that in 1983, we were in Washington explaining the differences in policies between British Columbia, Ontario, and Quebec. We were maintaining Ontario's unique interests in this issue. My question is, in light of this clear comment in the ruling itself, that you failed to give adequate responses to the question concerning the specificity of the provincial stumpage programs. In light of that comment, in light of the fact that you were never in Washington, in light of the fact that your Minister of Natural Resources wouldn't even know what the Washington Monument looked like, why is no one standing up and fighting for Ontario jobs? Why did you fail?
Minister.
Just what does the Washington Monument do? Is that where you held your meeting?
It's my understanding that when you went to Washington in '83, you didn't really contribute too much to the discussions.
Well, the truth comes out.
New order. New question, the member for Riverdale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. The member for Riverdale, new question.
My question is to the Minister of the Environment. That lead-contaminated soil poses a grave threat to our children in South Riverdale is well known to this House. Last week, the Royal Society of Canada, Commission on Lead in the Environment, recommended soil replacement where lead soil levels exceed 500 parts per million and where blood lead levels in children exceed 3 micrograms per deciliter more than the average. Last year, the ministry tested 400 properties in South Riverdale. Will the minister advise the House how many of those 400 properties show lead levels of above 500 parts per million, and when his ministry will replace that soil?
Minister.
The question the member raises, along with the information that was provided in the report that he referred to, the Royal Society report, was certainly very helpful to the Ministry of the Environment, and I think right across the country in terms of assessing new thresholds that they would use or that they would recommend for the removal of soils. As a result of that, and as a result of studies that are being done at the present time by the Medical Officer of Health in Toronto, trying to relate the level of lead in the soils to the people in the surrounding area, and then compare that with other parts of the province, that comparison. That's going to be very useful, and I can tell the member that the information provided by that Royal Society report is certainly in the Ministry of the Environment now and is being considered, because I think it may alter what we have conceived in the past to be the level at which it should be removed. So I can certainly tell the member we have this under very active consideration now.
Supplementary, the member for Bellwoods.
Well, that was a masterpiece of disinformation, if I may say to the minister. The question was, are you prepared to release the data on the number of properties where the lead levels are above 500 parts per million and remove the soil? My supplementary has to do with the neighborhoods surrounding Toronto's refiner and smelters lead plant in the Niagara neighborhood. The Royal Society found properties with lead levels as high as 2,300 parts per billion. I repeat the question. Please answer it. Are you going to release the data showing the number of properties in both of those neighborhoods above 500 parts per million? And secondly, and most importantly, are you going to set up an implementation group in your ministry to remove the soil?
Minister?
I don't know how the member defines it as disinformation, because I wanted to deal with as much of the question as had been asked by the member for Riverdale as possible. To the specific question of to the member for Bellwoods, I can tell him that certainly that will be provided. The assessment of it'll be provided even before the assessment that is being done by the medical officer of health. I think the original thought was that the assessment report by the medical officer of health and the ministry report should be one report. I think that what I have determined from the member for Riverdale's constituents and others is that independent of that information should be forthcoming, and most certainly it will be. And to the second part of it about the implementation, I can tell the member that as a result of the information that the member for Riverdale brought to my attention and the information to which you make reference, we will be looking at the implementation of that. We have to look at and determine what the specific level should be, but I can tell the member that all of that information will be very relevant to the final decision which is made.
New question, the member for... Order. New question, the member for Brampton.
Mr. Minister, I have a question for the Minister of Consumer and Commercial Relations. Just recently, there were press reports indicating that the Brewers Retail had opened a local store in one of the apartment buildings, I believe in Scarborough. There are also reports in the press that they intend or are looking at the question of opening stores at local subway stops. My question to the minister is, are they authorized to do that, or do they require authorization, and have they obtained it?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, the Brewers Warehouse is a private venture company made up of the Brewers of Ontario, and they establish their own commercial leases and locations on their own. They do not require permission from the Liquor Control Board or the Liquor License Board.
Supplementary?
By way of supplementary, Mr. Speaker, in all of the material that I received over the period of time that I was being lobbied with reference to this question, they raised many of the questions that the opposition did in terms of the availability, all of the horrendous things that were going to result from it. Were there ever any indications to the minister when they were, or have you been advised of these proposals by the Brewers Retail that they intend to set up stores at subway station stops?
Minister?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think all members will know, because I think everybody was sent a copy of a brief prepared by the Brewers, the Brewers Warehouse. And in it, they recommended various things that they could do, and one of the things that they suggested is that they could set up beer stores in subway stations on a long-term basis with extended hours. That's really all I can tell you about it.
New question, the member for Simcoe Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Tourism and Recreation. Mr. Minister, last Thursday, in response to a question I asked regarding Bill 38, that's the use of lottery profits, you stated there is no message of fear. There's no fear whatsoever. Mr. Minister, are you aware of an organization called the Alliance to Protect Culture, Recreation, Sports and Fitness in Ontario, and what this group just represents?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, the only fear that I know is the fact that in 1983, the previous government froze the capital programs and didn't provide any funding at all for the various programs. That's the fear that exists in this province.
Why don't you listen for a change? Why don't you listen to the bloody question, then you might be able to answer it.
Supplementary.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. If this side of the House needs a mathematics test, we'll ask the Minister of Industry, Trade and Technology, not him. Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Minister, in case you don't know, and obviously you don't, the Alliance to Protect Culture, Recreation, Sports and Fitness in Ontario represents 85 organizations from across Ontario. 85 organizations that were not consulted prior to introduction of Bill 38. They've written us their letters about the bill. Here they are here. We've got them.
And your question is?
And they're meeting in Toronto tonight, this evening, to discuss their fears. Now, in light of this fact that the fear does exist and we've established this, are you willing to agree to pull Bill 38 and consult with these concerns organizations, many of whom are made up by volunteer help?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I have heard from many organizations throughout the province. I think it's great that they should write and express the need for assistance for their various programs, but the people also know that they have been getting more assistance from this government than they'd ever got in the history of this province. They know, and I'll meet with them.
Why so many letters?
Once again, I'm waiting patiently. Order. Order. We'll just wait if you want to waste the time. New question, Order. 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 New question, the member for Windsor Riverside.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question to the Minister of the Environment. The Minister will likely be aware that his ministry has imposed a development freeze on the east end of Windsor, also including Tecumseh, St. Clair Beach, and Sandwich South, effectively a development freeze because they have said they will appeal any proposals for development to the Ontario Municipal Board because of the lack of sewage capacity in the east end sewage treatment plant. Well, I agree with that decision because there is not adequate capacity. I'd like to ask the Minister, why has his ministry not implemented a program to adequately assist municipalities so they can afford additions to their sewage treatment plants? The cost of this one to be $17 million.
Minister?
I think the member would be aware that the Ministry of the Environment, as a matter of fact, it hasn't simply been since I've been the minister, other ministers would be aware of this as well, some time ago set up a program where a substantial amount of money was made available to municipalities. And if you look at the years they were building their infrastructure, for instance, you would see some very high years of expenditures in terms of the amount of money provided. We're now getting into a period of time where we're into municipal infrastructure renewal, which I think is more of what we're looking for. This is peripheral to that. This is peripheral to that. And I can say to the member that my ministry has been working on this. I have had communications with those in the area the member represents, and in addition to this, raised this at the annual meeting of the Council of Resource and Environment Ministers recently under the title of infrastructure renewal, because I think it is essential, particularly in the kind of pockets the member talks about, where there is a pollution problem, that the program of eliminating that water pollution it should be accelerated. It can best be accelerated if we're able to get some federal assistance or participation in this. And I'm mildly optimistic that we may see this as a result of the deliberations that took place at the Environment Ministers' Conference.
Supplementary.
If the federal government is not prepared to participate in this program, which is a likely scenario, would the minister not be prepared to start his own program? And in this specific case, would he be willing to look at the fact that if Tecumseh and St. Clair Beach and Sandwich South, as three independent municipalities, applied to your government for funding for their own sewage treatment plant, the rate of grant would be much higher than 15%. Since they're operating together and saving the taxpayers' money, would it not be appropriate to fund them at a higher rate than the 15%?
The member's suggestion, along with those which have been made, and I learned this from the Leader of the Opposition, who always used to do this when he was on this side of the House. I used to mention the members on our side of the House, and I know along with the member for Windsor Sandwich and others in that area who have drawn this to my attention, I can say that we are actually in the process of developing such a program, because the member has a good question, a serious question, which all the members in the area, the member for Walkerville, on numerous occasions has certainly drawn this to my attention. As a result of all of the representations from all parties in this House, we are moving forward on that to a point where I think even the member opposite would not be critical of what we were doing in the ministry.
New question.
Is that okay, Larry?
The member for Durham York.
A question, Mr. Speaker, for the Minister of Agriculture. In what representation have you made to the federal government to give them some guidance in how to spend the portion of the $1 billion that they expect to give to farmers in light of, or assistance in light of the U.S. Farm Bill in Ontario?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, this issue was first raised at the Ag Ministers Conference, which was held in British Columbia the last week of August. And at that time, the Premier of Saskatchewan made a very strong pitch for $1 billion to be applied to the Western grain producers. This minister indicated to Mr. Wise that if there was to be any deficiency payments made by the federal government, that they were to be applied on an equitable basis right across this country, because we also have grain producers in Ontario, we have corn producers, and we have the soybean growers and other growers of oilseeds who are in just as much difficulty because of the price and now the weather as they are in Western Canada. So I, representing Ontario, asked for in excess of $1 billion to be applied right across this country. Well, then about 2 weeks ago, the deputy ministers met, and they were saddled with the responsibility of making some determination as to how the money should best be applied across the country. Should it be by way of guaranteed loans? Should it be by way of a cash payout? So they are presently working on that, but I have got the assurance from Mr. Wise that the $1 billion is a national program, and we will certainly get our share.
Supplementary?
Can we expect from your government a matching dollar per dollar when the allocation does come to Ontario producers?
Minister?
It's premature to say what the provincial government will be doing at this time, because we have no idea what the ultimate damage will be to those crop producers because of the weather, because of low prices due to the Food Security Act in the United States. But I do have a committee established that is monitoring the situation, has been for some time, will continue to do so, and they will be suggesting options that we may well have to apply when we find out just how extensively the damage is. But we will be working very closely with our federal counterpart, and we will certainly see what can and has to be done for the farmers of this province.
New question, the member for Welland Thorold.
Mr. Speaker, I believe the Minister of Consumer and Commercial Relations is someplace within the precincts. I wonder if he would take his seat. I'd like to pose a question to him on insurance again. Mr. Speaker, given that it's 20 months now since the insurance company started to implement their tremendous rate increases and their unjust policies in both auto insurance and liability insurance, and you yet haven't lifted a finger to impede them in that, and given it's about 6 months since Slater reported, I wonder if you could tell us when you'll be introducing new legislation or policy to stop these blatant abuses of the public by the insurance companies, and what might be the main features of that legislation or policy.
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, the member will know that Dr. Slater released his report May the 9th. I then welcome response to his report because it was a report to government and not a report of government. I invited the general population, the profession, the insurance industry, the legal profession, to address his report, and I gave them until the end of August to do so. We received close to 200 responses. The Superintendent of Insurance is now analyzing those and making recommendations, and I will be bringing it forward as soon as I can.
Supplementary?
I'm kind of appalled by the indifference in that answer to the timing and to the fact that you haven't intervened at all over this long period of time. I wonder, do you mean that you can't even tell us at this late date whether you're going to stop such injustices as rates based on age, sex, and marital status, whether in all drivers in one household being penalized for one driver's record and the injustice of drivers being forced to go to facility insurance for frivolous reasons? Apart from the fact that you could and should have acted on these a year ago, are you telling us now that you haven't even made up your mind on any of these important issues yet?
Minister?
No leadership.
I should tell the honourable member that certain things have been done. We have looked at the whole area of age, sex, and marital status. We have asked the industry to compile data eliminating those criteria. We have set up and helped the school board set up reciprocals, as I'm sure you're aware. We have worked on a plan whereby we can provide liability insurance to manufacturers doing business in the United States. We are well on our way to implementing a Canadian insurance exchange. We have done a whole host of things. But I should say that on this side of the House, we do not go off half-cocked until we have the facts. And when we have the facts, we will act.
Time for oral questions has expired.